Hey, I'm Sadie and welcome to Zaineski. Finally back after a stressful few months, so why not return with some much needed Gunpla content that I really have a lot to catch up on. For today though, I want to talk about one of the more fascinating recent pieces in my collection, the 1/144th scale RX-78-2 Gundam Workshop Kit version. This isn't a mass retail kit, rather just a free kit that you can get from hobby events, and I got mine through Toy Kingdom's 2024 Gundam Model Kit Caravan that happened in April. I even got featured on the Gundam Philippines Facebook page, which isn't an achievement I ever expected to happen, but I'm so happy it happened. Probably should have shaved though. While I could make a whole video about the fun experience of being there, this is a toy review channel, mostly, and there's just so many fascinating points in this model that I'd love to go in depth on, you know, give it some love like how we do here on Zaineski. The box alone is already pretty interesting. It's surprisingly large for a simple kit, being the size of very early HGUC boxes like the gun tank I have here that has all the same dimensions. And this box is crammed with information. There's so much to read about this box, introducing us to Gundam, Gunpla, and a lot of stuff that's really helpful to beginners, even if a little vague. Since I participated in the store building of this kit, my runners are already empty, but I did of course take photos before assembly, and you do only get two of them, a multicolored runner A and a minty white runner B. You also get a sheet of foil stickers that is actually rather interesting, so we'll be going in depth about them more later. The instruction manual is adorably tiny, having only a total of 6 pages long, with 2.5 being for assembly instructions, while the rest of the space is used for information. And cool thing to note about these instructions is that they're all in color, which makes them so much easier for beginners to read clearly which part they'll need. Oh, and one last thing. It says here on the manual and the box that this model features the touchgate runners similar to entry grades, which means you can actually just separate these pieces by hand, more on this later. But the store was kind enough to provide very dull entry numbers that had its spring taken out for safety reasons, I guess. And after a whopping 25 minutes of building, here's the completed Gundam Workshop kit. For being a giveaway kit, it's surprising just how good this model kit looks. Compared to the previous Caravan kits, which were the old entry grades, this one is just a lot more complete as a model. Almost no hollow spaces to be seen besides the back of the hands, and the colors are also very well represented. No shade on the old entry grades though. I'm not saying they're bad, it's just that since their time, Bandai learned more clever approaches to simplify the engineering of their model kits, even though this approach is very similar to something like an older HGUC kits, so something like the 020 Gym, where the philosophy was mostly just two halves sandwiched together, with maybe 1 or 2 extra parts for colors or joints, which is why there's very noticeable seams all over the kit. A bit unsightly, but I guess for a modeler this is to be expected. Aesthetic-wise, it's very similar to the HGUC 191 Revive Gundam, a very anime-accurate approach in terms of mechanical design, just with a bit more sensible proportions compared to that rather lanky kit. I did review the Revive Gundam a long time ago, but I have since donated its parts to other builds, so unfortunately I can't really compare them side by side. But I can at least compare it to the rest of my white base gang, the HGUC 007 gun tank that I'm still in the progress of fixing, and my 190 gun cannon Revive that I reviewed a couple months ago. If you ever wanted to display it with the Zaku, here it is next to the 234 Char Zaku that I customized. And of course, the Figma Styles female-bodied Chiaki, the Furio Takaradarika, and the Sega PM figure Mamako Oski, the usual for Zaineski reviews. And in terms of actual size, the box claims it's 1/144th scale, and at around 12.5 centimeters, it definitely checks out, with some wiggle room in terms of proportions. Returning to the topic of the head, no surprise, the eyes aren't colored in. Of course you do get the foil stickers for color correction, but take a look at this. There's actually a ton of excess that you have to fold over. And one other neat little thing about this sticker is that there's a notch cut out of the top, which was done to fit in between this plastic structure on the eyes, but it also provides a neat benefit of making it easier to align the eye sticker, so that's a solid plus in my eyes, no pun intended. The crotch chevron sticker is just as noteworthy, being significantly longer to cover the whole panel you're placing it on, since now it's completely in yellow instead of being in all red. And that's due to the fact that the chevron panel is actually one whole piece with those squares you'd find on the front skirts. An interesting approach to the design for sure, but it doesn't really bode well for the legs, but we'll get to that later. Another oddity in design with this model is the side of the calves, with the back part sticking out just a bit too much and doesn't even align with the shape of the actual calf. This may have been done due to manufacturing limitations with plastic injection molding, but I'm not really an injection molding expert. I'm still studying its ins and outs, so I can't say for certain. I personally don't think it's due to any molding limits, but with how it's laid out on the runner, it could be a possibility. But no matter the reasoning, it's rather unsightly, and fixing it is gonna be a bit tricky and kind of more trouble than it's worth. Though that isn't the worst case of injection molding limits. The only accessory you get with this model is the beam rifle, which I know sounds really bad since the older Caravan Gundam model had a whole shield included, but considering what else this model does better, I think it's a worthy sacrifice. Back to the beam rifle though, since it's molded as one whole piece on the runner, the backside of the rifle has a lot of these hollow spaces. It kind of ruins the rather nice detailing that you find on the presentable side. But for the sake of cost, I guess sacrifices had to be made. The hands aren't safe from freakish displays either. It's basically a whole fist with a slot cut out of it that only fits the straight handle of the beam rifle and nothing else. You could replace these hands with spares from a different kit if you're feeling a bit generous, since it does use the ball joints on the wrist that most HG kits have, but this comes at a cost. Sidetracking for a bit, I remember at the Caravan event, a very young kid came up to one of the employees because during their play session, one of the V-fins of their model kit snapped off. First of all, that poor kid. Skill issue, learn to model repairs. But this whole ordeal is just because Bandai decided to use their touchgate plastic, which tends to be more brittle and wears down much easier than their standard polystyrene. You'd know this if you ever bought an entry grade. I replaced my copy's hands with one from the HG Revive kit for testing, but that came at an unfortunate cost of having the sockets completely unusable with the original hands, so for this shoot I just had to keep them on with blue tack and a prayer. Luckily, if you do want to keep the original hands, the beam sabers won't exactly be a problem, as they're a solid fake part on this very nice looking backpack. I say a lot of praise for this design actually. Unfortunately, the backpack itself doesn't use the standard connectors, nor does it fit kits with pegs on their back since the distance of these two holes are bespoke for this model kit specifically. Basically, modding is the only way to go if you want to use this backpack, and unfortunately, it won't be a very easy process either. I'd say that's honestly the most disappointing aspect for me because this backpack looks really nice. But if you ask me, the most disappointing aspect of the model in a general sense is the articulation. Starting from the head, it's on a very limited ball joint that can barely look up and not at all down, and rotation's only possible since they removed chunk of the collar. It uses the modern polycap part in plastic for the shoulder joint, so it rotates quite well on the ball, but the shoulder block doesn't have a hinge outward, so the movement only happens at that polycap part. Bicep swivel, double jointed elbows that allow for a little over 90 degrees, and a ball jointed wrist as we've covered earlier. Very limited waist swivel as it keeps crashing everywhere. And as I've alluded to earlier, the skirts have zero movement to them, which makes the leg articulation disappointingly limited. No thigh swivel, but the pegs are done at an angle, which makes the leg spread look a lot more dynamic. Single jointed knee, a hinge at the ankle guard that allows it to move up, and the ankle itself has a very familiar type of construction with the ball joint at the ankle proper, and the socket polycap part having a slight hinge. But funnily enough, there's a 3mm stand connector that doesn't like 3mm stands between its legs. But good luck trying to get this guy into some dynamic poses. It's severely limited in articulation, which I'm not surprised by, but I will give this guy some credit. There's joints on this model kit that other Caravan kits didn't even have, like elbows and knees. So this guy is technically advanced for the standard that he falls into. When deconstructed, there are definitely some familiar looking parts and connections on the build of this model, but there's also just a lot of proprietary connections that, along with the plastic quality, doesn't lend this model well towards any sort of customization or kit bashes. So really, with all the notable faults of this kit, I can't necessarily recommend this to a lot of modelers. But at the same time, I think saying that is also a bit unfair as it kind of misses the point of this model kit. This isn't some prideful showcase of Bandai's Plamo engineering or a beginner's first model. Hell, it's not even a product you can physically buy retail. Judging it by the standards of something like an HG or an entry grade or anything similar is kind of redundant. This model is a freebie from hobby events, quite literally a novelty, and for being a neat giveaway item, I'd say it's well worth the experience. And that's really what I feel about this model kit. It's an experience, more so than any other model kits, and what it does is give you an interesting experience free of charge, and it does a pretty damn good job at that.